What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar, what news is affecting Tesla thus far, what you should be watching for looking at Tesla stock. But before I begin things up all this information, before I talk about how Tesla is looking, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moon, deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very, very soon. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to Tesla. So looking at Tesla, we had this very, very nice accumulation structure, which led to a little balance, but it wasn't really enough to get this thing to rocket. Instead, Tesla tried to push up and it got this big rejection because we had so much bad news that came out for Tesla. We had some new analysts basically cutting their price targets on Tesla. We had saw some bad news about, more fears about Tesla. Not to mention some news about the Panasonic battery factory that's been delayed. So I'm going to be talking more about that in some detail later on. But I first want to talk about something important about the markets. So in my videos, I may mention that some days the stocks look bullish, sometimes they could look bearish. Sometimes the moves could happen intraday and then the market could turn because the market can turn like crazy, and sometimes it could happen very quickly. On top of this, if I do call downside for certain stocks, it doesn't mean I'm a big bear for the next few weeks. Usually, I'm just referring to very, very short term projections. All right. I want to make that as clear as possible. So I'm saying that because when you look at SPY, the QQQ and such, they're starting to look like they favor the bears a little bit more, which does make me open to the possibility of some downside. Now, if the market does cool off a little bit, I'm not going to say it's going to last a long time because the market could still turn off lots of data, which is coming out later on during the week. So I'm going to be talking more about the data first, when the market could still make some very, very big moves, and how things are going to be looking. Tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, January 23rd. I want to mention that there are two main pieces of data coming out. At 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the manufacturing and services numbers coming out. That's 30 minutes after market open. The Richmond Fed Manufacturing Index and the manufacturing shipments alongside the manufacturing services are going to be very important for inflationary data and also very important for current supply chains because we know there's some issues with supply, and this is going to be important for the markets. So watch for a big move at 10 o'clock a.m. We'll see if the numbers look weaker than expected or not. So at 10 a.m., 30 minutes after market open, expect some volatility. Then also at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the 52-week bill auction coming out. Watch and see some volatility at that time as well. That's going to be very minor. So the main time to be watching for data is 10 a.m. Now, overall, okay, the data for Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday are not that crazy, not that insane. They're likely not going to lead to like insane moves. But then Thursday and Friday are when we have bigger pieces of data, which will lead to more volatility in the markets, in my opinion. On Thursday, we have the GDP numbers, jobless claims, and then on Friday, we have PCE inflationary data. It's similar to CPI that's coming out. For Friday, it's PCE instead. So that's when we're going to see bigger moves, Thursday and Friday. I just want to make that as clear as possible. Tuesday comes up tomorrow. The data is minor for the most part. Just at 10 a.m., watch for volatility tomorrow. Besides that, what else is going to affect the market big time is going to be the earnings. I don't think Tuesday is going to be that crazy. We have Verizon before market open. Then we have Netflix after market close. Might cause some volatility, so watch Netflix. And then for Wednesday, we have AT&T before market open. Then we have Tesla announcing its earnings alongside IBM. Now, Tesla could shake the entire market, so this could also be very big for SPY, the QQQ, and the others out there. So we'll be watching this very, very carefully. Now, I also want to add that when it comes to the way the market has been moving, the fear and greed index is still at greed. We're not at extreme greed right now. We're not at neutral. We're still kind of stuck where we were previously. We're still seeing other indicators at their extremes, but the put and call positioning is actually dropping a little bit. We're actually seeing some puts being closed still. So we're still seeing that. We'll see if this changes. For now, this is still on greed mode. The VIX is technically below the 50-day moving average, which does suggest there will later on be possible upside for the markets again. Now, could the market cool off a point or two, just a little bit temporarily? It sure could, but the VIX is opening up a possibility of more upside later on. I'll be kind of clarifying this a little bit later on when I break down the charts. I'll make this very simple later on, guys. Right now, for March, the market's expecting the Fed to keep rates the same. For January, we're expecting the same thing. And this hasn't really changed now. The market has a very, very different view relative to before. The Dow has broken highs once again. S&P 500 made new all-time highs again, but things are starting to shift on the charts as we're approaching some key resistance. For Tesla, as I mentioned in my morning video, I went into more detail about this, but I just want to be very quick with this. Morgan Stanley analyst Adam Jonas basically cut his Tesla price targets to 345 down from 380, but he kept his overweight rating overall. He mentioned that the overall momentum is stalling, there's oversupply and less demand, at least for Teslas, and he mentioned that there could be some pain coming. He also outlined many pieces of evidence that suggest that EV supply is still growing while demand is slowing, and there's some negative developments for Tesla. That's his view for now. He's still bullish, but he doesn't think Tesla could run as hard as before. It's just his view. Now, Panasonic is also cooling on ideas for the third US plant for Tesla batteries. As one of the largest manufacturers of batteries out there in the world, Panasonic is going to likely delay its plans to build another, factory for their batteries, which is going to help Tesla. That is a little bit negative news. So, with that coming out, this also was negative for Tesla. There's also more bad news that came out throughout the day, but I just wanted to call out these two. That's part of why Tesla ended up dropping the way it did. Now, for other pieces of news, Barclays has come out. They're giving Tesla an equal weight rating, saying it's going to perform equally with the markets. Wedbush is saying Tesla's going to outperform, however, so those views are the same. The price price ratio is dropping because Tesla's showing a lot of weakness relative to the market, especially looking at their price price ratio. So Tesla's still looking very weak, technically speaking. Tuesdays tend to be green only about 52% of the time, and watch for volatility around 11 a.m. and then 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. now. This was adjusted just a little bit. That's in terms of seasonality. For the volume, we had 118 million, about not bad whatsoever. And then don't forget about how the short volume has been dropping just a little bit, so we're not actually seeing it as aggressive. I don't think this was actually updated, so this is as of Friday. It was kind of updated, so we'll see what excuse me, we'll see what happens going into later on tomorrow. But besides that, guys, now I just want to break down the charts. Going to try to be kind of quick with this part and then talk about something very important. So the thing about Tesla is people are going crazy right now. They're seeing Tesla dropping. They're saying it's going to crash. It's the end of the world. But this is when you want to be very careful because I'm noticing that although Tesla's continuing to downtrend, it is looking very weak, technically speaking. We're actually developing a triple bullish divergence. The RSI is actually hovering upwards. It's been on a slight uptrend, which suggests that there could be a bounce coming. I'm starting to wonder, is it going to be after earnings, right? Imagine if they squeeze a lot of these shorts, they cause Tesla to run when everyone is expecting Tesla to crash back down to 180, 150. That would be very, very interesting. But nothing is guaranteed, right? We have to wait and see what earnings give us. That's the reason why I'm telling you all, I'm not a true Tesla mega bull or mega bear for the short term. For the long term, I'm a mega bull. I think Tesla's going to run like crazy for the long term. Short term, I'm not sure yet because I want to wait and see what earnings will cause because earnings will be very key for Tesla and they're going to affect the whole markets. But I'm keeping this bullish divergence in the back of my mind, thinking that what if they pull something that's going to just cause the most ironic outcome and then just trick all these bears out there who are saying Tesla's going to crash to 150, 180. It could be a trap. Just a possibility, guys. Not saying it will or will not happen. It's just a possibility. Anyways, outside of that, let's break down the charts now. How is Tesla looking? Well, it tried to bounce, but you'll notice that on the 4-hour time frame, we're actually turning a little bit more bearish, and we keep projecting very close to the 20 EMA. So it's really struggling to break the 20 EMA. We actually tested this today and rejected. So what could happen tomorrow is, and what you'll notice is we typically kind of like push when we open and come back down. So Tesla may make an attempt to get back up to the 212s, then reject and just trade sideways. That is very possible. There's a good chance this thing might try to retrace a little bit back up to 212, reject, and just trade sideways within its range. Watch resistance at 210. If that breaks, there's 212. If we break above that, we could get very close to the 216s to 217s. If we break those highs, 220 plus is coming. If we're bearish, you want to see it basically lose to 207s. I'm sorry, 207s, then we have 205s. And if we lose the 205s, our next target is going to be all the way down to about 200. The very low 200s is a real possibility. So we're going to be watching that very carefully. What do I think is going to happen? We might pop first back to 212, reject, and start coming back down and just trade very, very sideways. Just like how we did this today, we kind of popped and dropped. We might see that's tomorrow. Lots of like a little pop and drop and sideways price action, lots of chop. especially if we get more bad news, because every single day we're getting bad news after bad news after bad news. It's just not stopping. And that's really, really hurting Tesla's ability to bounce. That's something that's very important to note. So, overall, the trend is still bearish, technically speaking. We're still underperforming compared to the market. We're still making lower highs and lower lows. Tesla is still downtrending. All right. So, if it keeps downtrending like this, though, if it keeps maintaining these low levels, I'm going to be very suspicious as we approach earnings because we have a triple bullish divergence developing, which typically suggests a bounce should be coming soon. So this is very suspicious to me, and we will see if there's a trap that's forming or not. I'll be talking about this later on for Tesla's earnings. But for now, Tesla looks kind of weak, looks kind of bearish, and we'll see what earnings brings us. Will earnings cause a massive bounce for Tesla or not? We'll just have to wait and see. Now, SPY is starting to contract just a little bit. It's still holding up decently. It's holding up better than the QQQ and some tech stocks out there, but I just want to call out something very important. SPY has a potential head and shoulders like structure developing on it, though. That is something that's very important and worth noting. If we want to turn bullish, you first want to get above 484, and then we have 485, the highs up here. If we're bullish, we want to break the 485s and eventually push up to 486, then 487.5. If we're bearish, you want to see this thing basically lose the support down here at 483, then 482.75. If we lose that support, expect a bigger drop to 481 and then 480 all the way down here. What do I think is more probable? With this head and shoulders like structure, there's a risk of SPY kind of like pushing and coming back down. We also have this imbalance down here, so it could drop just a little bit. It doesn't have to last forever. Could just last a day or so before this thing tries to bounce back up again. And the reason I'm saying there still could be a bounce coming in the future is because of the VIX. The VIX broke below the 50 moving average, and we have this big gap here to fill. We have this big unfilled gap. So I think the market may have more upside potential eventually. I'm not sure if the VIX is going to like pop a little bit first before it comes back down like this, as the market might drop first before it pushes higher. We'll just have to wait and see. But there is a risk of that. SPY has a potential head and shoulders like structure that could be developing. Uh, if we're going to invalidate this and we go back to bullish, you have to break 485. If you want to be bearish, you want to see this thing lose the 482.75 area and we turn more bearish. So watch and see which way it breaks. Otherwise, we're kind of stuck for now, and we'll see what happens with this head and shoulders. On the QQQ, if we're bullish, you want to see this thing basically break above 422.5, then 424 and start pushing upwards. If we're bearish, you want to see it basically lose this low in the low 421s and eventually 420, and a bigger drop is going to be coming towards this imbalance, and it's going to turn bearish. The market's trying to hold up in the after hours, but let me just mention something important. The QQQ on the 4 hour, it is turning a little bit, starting to turn right here. It could actually cool off towards our 20 EMA, which is going to be very close to the 417s by tomorrow as it's uptrending just a little bit. So there is a risk of a little bit of downside before this thing attempts to bounce again. So when I say that, I don't mean it's going to crash forever. It could just drop a few points, then bounce later on. I'm seeing that as a real possibility on the QQQ. It's starting to contract just a bit. So watch that very carefully. For a few more tickers out there, we have Aapl stock right here. Aapl is currently around very tight resistance. As I mentioned in my morning video, we're approaching 195, which is my target after we had this nice double bottom like formation. But here's the issue with Aapl, okay? We're at resistance at 195. We rejected off this place 3 times in the past. We'll see if we reject this time around or not. The best thing to do is just be very patient and be very careful. So if we're bullish, we have to try to break above 195 and try to close above that. Our next target is going to be all the way up towards 197 if we do end up achieving that, right? If we're bearish, if we end up losing this support right here at 193.5, watch 192.5. If we lose that, we're going to be sinking all the way down to 190.5. Will Aapl lose 192.5? Or are we going to break 195? We're going to have to wait and see. We're kind of stuck right now. It may attempt to push up, but watch that 195 resistance. We'll just have to see how it goes. On Nvda, Nvda is starting to turn just a little bit, but here's the thing about Nvda. With this potential resistance forming around 600 and also 597, watch these resistance areas. If you want to be bullish, you want to see this thing break above 600 and 602. If that breaks, 605 is our next target, essentially, and then we have 607 and 610 coming next. These levels tend to be a little tight on Nvidia, just judging by how it's been moving. If Nvidia ends up failing, If we lose 595, expect a bigger drop to 592, then eventually 590, and a bigger drop would be coming towards these imbalances. Want to be a little bit careful with Nvidia. This thing managed to hit tight resistance at 600, so we'll see how it reacts if we get a rejection or not. If we do reject, we could be approaching all these new levels again, so watch it very, very carefully. With that being said, guys, I went over the majority of stocks out there, looking at the head and shoulders that could be developing on SPY. There's a risk of it actually dropping, but just to be safe, watch 485 because if we get good earnings and such, if it starts breaking 485, we could turn back to bullish. So watch that level very, very carefully. I'm always open-minded to anything. As far as Tesla goes, it's looking very weak, underperforming. So there's a risk of more downside. But if it keeps crashing, approaching its earnings, I would be, I would be, open-minded to the possibility of a bounce. If I'm going to be honest with you, for SoFi, looking at SoFi, this thing is looking bullish. If we break $8, watch 8.32 at the 200 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. If we break this, we're going to be pushing even higher. This is looking a bit bullish, but we have to break 8, then 8.32 first. For the IWM or the Russell 2000, we have to see this thing not just break out, but watch the test of 197. If we break 197, our next target is going to be 200, so watch that very carefully as well. For Microsoft, if anything, I would say that Microsoft is looking a little bit weaker. It's going to be testing 394, the 20 EMA. If we hold it, it's going to bounce and try to make its way back up towards the higher levels. So if it holds 394, watch for a bounce and a push up to 398. If we lose it, we're going to be sinking back down towards 390. So watch 394 very carefully at the 20 EMA. As of right now, we're trying to hold this. Watch that very carefully on Microsoft. On AMD, we're barely holding 165.7. If we lose that, we're going to be sinking to 160. If we bounce off of it, this is going to push back up towards the 170s. So watch it very carefully. Do we bounce off 165 or not? That's going to be a big test. Netflix has earnings coming up, so we'll see what this thing does. It's kind of choppy right now. It's been stuck between 480 to 490 throughout the day, back and forth price action. So I'll be very patient when watching this. On top of that, when it comes to a couple more tickers, we look at the VIX, okay? The VIX still has this big gap to fill below. It looks kind of bearish overall. Can it temporarily bounce if the market drops and then drop down later as the market starts pushing? Or is it going to just fill this gap quickly then bounce? We'll have to wait and see for now. The SQQQ is looking like it has attempted to push just a little bit. Can we push up a little higher towards 12.8 or is it going to fail? If it pushes higher, that would be a little bearish for the markets. We'll have to wait and see. The dollar index is showing some life, though it wants to push up a little bit higher towards 103.5. If we break that, it could turn a little bullish, and this could slow the market down temporarily before this thing comes back down later. But when you zoom out, you will notice that it's been kind of stationary. It's been very flat, hasn't really done much. So it has these moments where it's very stuck, pushes higher, then it just gets stuck. So it's not really doing much, right? It's still stuck within a range, technically. Coinbase has potential to bounce, in my opinion, if it could break the 20 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. So watch 128 as resistance. If we break this, we're going to be looking for a push towards basically 133. That's where this imbalance is. If we break that, our next target is 136. So do we break 128 or do we reject? If we reject, we're going to be retracing back down towards 125. Then we have this next target at 122.5. If we're bullish, we break this, we're going to push higher. So watch that very carefully. For Google, if we're bearish, you want to see this thing basically, it's basically going to test 146.4. If we're bearish, you want to lose 146 and then come down to 144. If we're bullish, you want to see this thing bounce off 146 and push back up to basically get very, very close to 150 again. So do we come down here and bounce off the 20 EMA or do we end up rejecting? Do we just break through it and start sinking? If we lose this green EMA, that's going to cause this thing to drop, so watch that very carefully. On Amazon, we're kind of hovering above the 20 EMA. If we're bullish, you want to see it basically break this resistance at 155. If it breaks this, it's going to push up. If we lose 154, it's going to sink down to 153.09, and eventually the lower levels like 151.8 is coming next. So it all depends on how it reacts to the 20 EMA. A lot of these tech stocks are just barely holding them. So we'll see how it reacts. If it loses this, it sinks down. If it holds, it could bounce. Why am I saying this? Because it's so indecisive. For the last 4 hours, it was just stuck in a very tiny range. So it's very indecisive. We'll just have to wait tomorrow to see. Same thing with Meta. It's a little bit indecisive, kind of looking bearish though. I think it's going to test 378 and we'll see if it bounces. The last time it hit this level, it did make an attempt to hold the 20 EMA. So that means that 378 may be tested and it might bounce off this or it might lose that. If it loses the 20 EMA at 378, expect a bigger drop. If it holds this, it could bounce from there. But anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for listening. Please have an absolutely spectacular rest of the day. I want the best for everyone else out there. So have a great day, guys. Watch Tesla very carefully. Earnings is approaching, but don't forget to watch your support very, very carefully. Tesla looks bearish for now, but we'll see what happens after earnings. Okay, so we'll see how it goes. Anyways, have a great day, guys, and peace out.